What is up, everybody? It's Tulak Sports. It's September 1st, 2020. I can't believe we're actually in September. I am back from vacation and refreshed, ready to rock. It's a big shout out to all the Win Daily crew who, especially my man Adam, who took over picks and pivots for me when I was out on vacation, getting some nice family time. But listen, we're back here again today. We've got another day of NBA. We've got another day of MLB. But I wanted to focus this show on the two-game NBA slate tonight. And I think what's interesting, if you guys read Picks and Pivots today, you've read all the content we have. We have free content out there today. You can come over today, create a free membership over at Win Daily Sports. Get an idea of what we've got. We've got a ton of content. We've got our projections. We've got our Discord chat. Everyone out there trying to figure out the best way to attack these slates, not only the two-game slate, but my man JT is in there breaking down his cheat sheets for the showdowns. Really, every way you can cut these up, we're trying to give you guys an edge. And I hope that you're taking advantage of it. And I hope you're excited about this because I think these slates have been very interesting. If you look at how the slates have been over the last couple days, Saturdays and Sundays slates were very star-driven. You saw the winning lineups in those cases on Saturdays and Sunday. Both had really more like 3 stars at the top, and then really using almost 5 punter value plays, 5K or lower on DK. You saw that was a pretty consistent strategy. What you saw then last night was very different, and it was interesting because you had the stars, right? You had Giannis and you had Harden. You had value, it seemed. With some guys like George Hill, and you had, a bunch of the guys on Miami that were super popular, like Iguodala. So there was a path there, but that path ultimately didn't prove out. The stars didn't have their ceiling games. A lot of that value ended up flopping, and you saw more balanced builds winning. And that leads us to tonight. And tonight's very interesting because if you look at our projections here, and I've got them up here on the screen, what you'll notice when you click on our projections, and right now I've got it set for DraftKings, and sorted by value. We don't really have any value that's jumping out as this like crazy 6x play or any real punts, right? Even when you look at the value and the guys that we've got projected from a high point per dollar perspective, you're looking at guys that are, 6K, 8K, 9K, 5K. You don't really have those punts. And it's going to be interesting to see how people look at tonight and how they attack it, because there is not this obvious value, but at the same time, we don't have the star power we've been having. You don't have Giannis. You don't have LeBron. You don't have Harden. The highest price guys we have are Donovan Mitchell, and we have Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray in what should be a great game. But these, there might be some sticker shock. And I mentioned this in my article today. Jamal Murray has been out of his mind. But now he's almost at 10K on DraftKings. And if you remember back game 1, you could have gotten him for $6,000. So there's some sticker shock there. And while the game logs have been legit, and I can't wait to see how this game plays out, I do wonder if people will end up paying that freight for him tonight. But I wanted to talk a little bit just about builds and how this looks. And I think, when you click on over to DraftKings and you start looking at builds, one of the things that I talked about this in my article, but I also just showed you a little bit on the projections. We don't have that crazy value, right? And because we don't have that crazy value, it's going to make a tougher decision for you on what you do up top. So we talked about a little bit this today, but I want to break it down for the people in the video, and give you guys an idea of what we're looking at. To me, the slate and the first decision you have to make is what you're going to do with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. To me, this is the most important decision you're going to make tonight because I think it has a cascading effect on what you do with the rest of your build. Denver has shown game in and game out, while their fringe pieces might get there here and there, this is a two-man show. It is Murray and it is Jokic, and frankly, anyone else that you bring up, we talk about it in Discord, like, what about this guy? What about this guy? If they're on the Nuggets, it literally can change game to game. And so I think if you're looking at Denver, you're literally just looking at these two pieces. Now, if you're going to start with these two guys in your build, it's very much doable, right? You can see the average remaining price for the rest of your build is about 5K. Tons of options that we can look at in that range. The question then becomes, if you're going this route, now how do you run it back, or do you run it back with guys on the Utah side, right? So I'm just going to click on Utah just so we can see their player pool. And listen, the decision point then is going to lead you to what do you do with Donovan Mitchell. If you add in Donovan Mitchell, and I can't argue against the play in a vacuum, but if you bring him in, all of a sudden your average per player is down to 4K. Right. And we just talked about this. There's not that much value. Last night you had guys in this range that you could have argued, right? You had guys like George Hill and Iguodala, and you had Jay Crowder, and you had Kelly Olynyk, and you had all these pieces, Lou Dort. I'm trying to think of who else, but point is you had a handful of guys in this 4K range that you could have made it work. Tonight, if you look at this, this build, if you start and just go to all of the players, right? And you just start looking in this range. You feel good about that? Because I don't. You're telling me that you're going to now start filling in with the Gary Harrises, the Brad Wanamakers of the world. I mean, it gets ugly, and it gets ugly quick. I just don't think there is a strong path on DraftKings to taking all three of these guys. I do, however, think that there is a path where you just simply fade Donovan Mitchell. I mentioned it before, with Denver, but if you think about how Denver is, they're a two-man show. If Murray and Jokic do not have a massive game, then the truth is, these Utah guys, you're not going to need the correlation. But if you think Murray and Jokic have ceiling games, you need the correlation on the Utah side. If you're not getting it with Mitchell, then where are you going to go? And I brought this up. The number one thing I look at is correlation. And if you look at Donovan Mitchell's correlation, the only player and the most negative correlated impact you could have is right here in Jordan Clarkson. Think about it. All of the big games here from Donovan Mitchell, if you were to look at it, right? You look at his game logs. The big games, the 60s, the 66, the 81, what did those come with? Massive real-life points, 44, 51, 57. In the games that he didn't go bonkers points-wise, where he got 30, he got 20, I mean, he's still giving you solid outings, 40 fantasy point outings, but he's so scoring dependent that you're literally going to be looking at that, as your path to get there. So back to Clarkson. If you're playing the strategy that Mitchell doesn't get there, someone else has to log the scoring. And to me, that's where Clarkson is. And that's why the correlation makes so much sense. Clarkson's scoring dependent, so is Mitchell. So if you're not playing Mitchell, the very first guy I think you put in is Jordan Clarkson. Taking it a step further, I would put in Mike Conley. Now, Conley, to be fair, I think you could play Conley alongside Mitchell, if you wanted to go that route, because look at the game logs. They're about the same, right? He's been in this 38 to 40 DK point range regardless, and it hasn't really ebbed and flowed depending on Mitchell being there because he gives you other categories. He's not a scoring-dependent player. So he's got the ability through rebounds and assists and steals to get you those points. So I think you can play him alongside Mitchell, but here I think, if you're not going to use Mitchell, then you can use Clarkson. After that, it gets a little bit fringy, and I'll be honest about that. I don't love Joe Ingles. I don't love Royce O'Neal. What I love about them is their price points, with these kinds of guys where, you can plug them into kind of to be honest, a gross forward spot today. If you're not using the Boston-Toronto game, it gets a little bit dicey. But these guys are going to give you the 30 minutes. There's some value in that, right? There's some stability in that. But, I don't know that you're going to get massive games. But I think, again, if you're just playing the idea that it's not a Donovan Mitchell night, you're essentially saying, well, then everybody else gets you there. And this is the path, you kind of have. The other option, and I talked about this a little bit, was looking at Boston and Toronto as a stack. Now, listen, Boston and Toronto, just like, if you look at Ingles and O'Neal as examples in the previous game, what I like about Boston and Toronto is they have condensed rotations and all their guys play a ton of minutes. The issue is when you look at the pricing, you're not really getting a ton of a discount on these guys. So, if you want to run a game stack of this game, and it's doable, right? You can lock in, if I were to do it, lock in Kemba, Smart, maybe you go Brown. I don't know that you can go all four. Tatum gets a little bit pricey. If you want to run it back with Toronto, I think you can do that with Siakam. I see a question in the chat about Robert Williams, and I wanted to bring him up. I think it made sense here. He is a very interesting value play, one that I was on heading into the slate. I'm interested to see how much ownership he ends up getting. If you looked at that game in game one, the Boston opted to use Williams instead of Cantor as their second big off the bench. If you watch the telecast, they actually talked about how they felt like Robert Williams actually gave them an edge with the second unit, and it was a better matchup. Where in the first round, Boston was using Cantor to match up with Embiid. Now they thought that Robert Williams made more sense with the second team, and he was a beast. I mean, listen, if you watch that game, he was all over the place. I mean, I don't think the game log necessarily is going to do justice for what an impact it seemed like he had on the court, but to get 25 fantasy points from a guy that's 3-3 on a slate with essentially no value, I think he's a great play, even just as a one-off. If you're game stacking Utah and Denver, I think he makes a ton of sense as a one-off play, just to get you some value. But even in a game stack here, it makes a lot of sense. And so you continue down this road, with these guys, and I think, listen, I'm just going to kind of stop it there. No real rhyme or reason other than, I got to keep one spot open for Denver and Utah. And I don't even know, as I'm clicking through. There you go. Not that I love Millsap, but just to give you an idea. I mean, this is doable, right? You can get Siakam and Van Fleet, and you can run it back with multiple Celtics pieces. It's definitely doable. The issue that I have with this build is that I just don't know that all of those guys can get you ceilings. So, where you saw in Utah and Denver, Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell are ceiling plays. Now, there are ceiling plays in this Boston-Toronto game. Don't get me wrong. But you're also talking about two of the top three defensive teams since we had the restart in the bubble. You're talking about from a larger sample size over the course of the regular season. These guys were two of the top five defensive teams in the league. So you have a tough defensive matchup and a lot of mouths to feed. So, where I can make arguments for Kemba or Brown or Siakam, whoever it is, the issue that you're going to have is that, you just don't know unless you're mass multi-entering. I think that this is a dangerous game stack because I think you could see a lot more floor than ceiling with these guys. And what you're hoping for if you're entering tournaments is that you just happen to land on the right guys. Tonight, the night Siakam goes nuts, or is it Van Fleet, right? Is it Kemba or is it Tatum? I saw somebody in the chat asked about, putting Tatum in here. It's absolutely doable. You can go in here and it would help if I was on the right game. So if you go in here, you can put Tatum in at small I actually want him at small forward just because the forward spots are kind of ugly tonight. So, you can do the same kind of build here, and go Kemba, Smart, Tatum, run it back with Siakam and Van Fleet. There's a ton of ways that you can go about this. But again, this works. I don't necessarily love it, but it's something that you can do, if this is a route that you wanted to go. So like if just to kind of complete the idea, again, on DraftKings, got to use somebody from the other game. So there, you're using Royce O'Neal. Certainly doable. I think there's a lot of floor. Again, I just don't know that I love the ceiling on this spot. So I wanted to take some time. You guys know when I do these videos, I like to just think more through the roster construction than anything else. And so hopefully that, this was helpful. We'll hopefully have another great night tonight, and we'll see you guys soon.